I was doing a run for the cure for CIBC, and I had done it for years. And I don't actually run, by the way. I just go to the run and I announce and I help people. Then I talk to them and I go, and then I come, welcome back, and that was it. But I was contributing because I believed in it. And the CIBC Run for the Cure, and it's for breast cancer. And one day a woman came up to me and she said, "Bill, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Now," and she had her daughter, I found out later, under her arm, and she was wearing a very bright pink shirt. And she said, "Bill, I'm a survivor." And I said, "I know, I can tell by your shirt. Thank you for sharing, but I'm really happy for you. Congratulations." And she said, "That's not the story." She said, "The story is," she said, "4 years ago, I was diagnosed with this horrible disease, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I could survive it. And I freaked out. I went home, and I went into my room, and I locked the door, and I stayed there. And I didn't move. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried for 3 days. I hardly moved. And all of a sudden," she said, "there was a knock on my door. And I opened it, and it was my husband. And he said, 'Somebody's here to visit you.' And it was my sister. And that's not that exciting for most people, but I hadn't seen my sister or spoken to her in about 5 years because we'd had a fight. And we stopped talking to each other. And we didn't even remember why. And she was standing there with tears in her eyes, and she was crying. And she said, 'I heard what's happened. I know what's going on. I'm so sorry about everything. I don't care about any of that. I only care about you.' And she gave me a big hug. And she told me left her job for a month and was coming to be with me to go through my process and the chemo. And I said, 'Yeah, in the middle of my life, suddenly a blessing.' I said, 'That's a beautiful story.' She said, 'That's not the end of the story.' She said, 'When we came outside and we came out into the living room, we sat down and I looked down the dining room table and there was food all over the dining room table, all over the dining room table.' She said, like beautiful trays of food and Pyrex dishes full of food. And she said, I said, where does that come from?" And my husband said, "Well, that's the neighbors. They found out that there was a problem and they wanted to make sure they gave us this food." And she said, "That sounds pretty nice, except for one thing." She said, "I didn't know my neighbors. We'd been living there for a few years, but I'd been so busy at work, I didn't notice who my neighbors were. I couldn't name them. I couldn't name two of them. And here they were, putting all this food down for me." She said, "It was just unbelievable." I said, "That's such a beautiful story." She said, "That's not the end of the story, Bill." She said, the next thing that happened was," she said, I looked over and at my daughter, and I realized that not only had I not noticed my neighbors, I hadn't been paying attention to my daughter, and my daughter was becoming one, and I was missing it. So in the middle of that hell, there was another blessing. She said, I wouldn't wish this disease on anybody. This is the most horrific, tragic disease you can get." She said, it breaks people's hearts all the time and takes their lives. But she said, "I will tell you, for me," she said, "in the middle of all that hell, I was finding blessings." And I wrote that down, and I wrote down hell blessing, because I write down notes about everything that I hear. And I said, wow, hell blessing. What an expression, what an idea. And since then, I've noticed how many times in my life, and I'll bet you can do the same thing in your life, how many times things have happened and you said, "Oh, this is just awful." But if you look, and you look right, and you see it right, remember, how you see the world determines how you feel and think. How you feel and think determines how you act, and how you act determines your destiny. If you look carefully, you can see the blessing. And I invite you, this COVID, it's been a bit of a hell, but there are blessings.